Hi, my name is Christine Madera, and I am the author of God and Drying. And I'm here with Henry Sullivan. And each or every other Friday, we talk about interesting things. And this week, we're talking about AI generally. And we're going to start with an experience, a very emotional, evocative. I could feel the energy coming to me through the email that I got from Henry about this, about an experience we had with Claude that seemed like Claude was really having a problem with Henry and not wanting to do what Henry wanted him to do. So Henry, and I will preface this by saying Henry is doing this amazing project of bringing his audiobook into like video life through AI and other tools, and it's doing a magnificent job. I'm very impressed. I have no idea how he's doing it, but he's sharing that. But this was kind of a little roadblock, and so I'm gonna hand it over to Henry and tell us about that story and where you are now with that too.
Thanks for saying the nice things about the things. I appreciate it. So I was this was like the first or second week. I think it was the second week because I mentioned it to you that I was starting this project. I wrongly projected that I would be done, oh, like maybe the next week or something. It's a lot more work than that, but AI tools make it possible to do this. Things that you have to do. So writers, we have our novels broken up into scenes. It might all be in the same document, but that's an easy thing. All you have to do is just copy the scene and paste it into another Word document. Or it needs to know the scene. My novel is about
Well, okay, well,
a
I'll ask you this because I need to you need to give a little bit more background. So what are
okay.
you using Claude for that it needs to have this to be able to create what you wanna create? So there's a
Oh,
there about how you're doing that.
that's a good point. So, um, to turn your novel from, in my case, I'm using the audiobook format because I already have quoting that was made by cast of voice actors. So I already have the audiobook version of my novel. Put it into a video miniseries. What you have to do is you have to create its ups. Where you create a clip is you take the frame that's the first part of what's going to happen in a little moment. Really doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It could be a mouse. It could be a squirrel. It could be thing. It doesn't really matter what it is. You need to give AI tool. I've been using Dance. You give it an idea of what the moment, how the moment begins and how the moment ends. You need to explain that to, or give it some sense. Will do will the blanks between A and point B. Make it look like if you have a person is coffee is on the table, to end it where they sipped a cup of coffee. Because you don't actually need the point A and point B, you can just have a point A and tell it what the character's going to do. You have these two frames. What dance will do is make it look like the character reaches down, pick up and sips it. And you can even tell it tone or the feel of is. So you can tell it the person is very introspective. They're not even looking at the table when they reach down and pick up the cup of coffee and they sip it. They do it very kind of almost robotically because they're actually thinking something else is on their mind. Or you can have them gulp it, very angry. Tell Dance, explain to Dance that that's what want. Reach down and pick it up really fast and then maybe look around and so on. So a lot to explain. You're going to write thousands of frames. You're going to create thousands of frames, not hundreds, thousands, because you have two per clip. The frames, the way that the frames are written are very different from the way we think. They're very different from the way we wrote the novel, different way of thinking. So the most efficient way to do it in the way that's not emotionally taxing to you is have another artificial intelligence that you explain to that artificial intelligence what you want. It creates the frames. Even give you some like advice in terms of, Dance actually works this way, so you don't want to do that, or Dance works that way, you don't want to do this. Actually do that, but it's doing most of the actual writing frames
So it's
because you create.
creating a prompt for you.
Exactly. It writes the prompts because that, for you to have to think in terms of what you want and then turn around and switch of writing to writing a prompt. it'll take forever. It's emotionally taxing. That's what I was, that's what I was setting Claude up to do for a particular scene. For the scene where in the serial killer's head. Well, this entire scene is written from the serial killer's point of view. It's the reason why Claude reacted. It did. It read the scene. It gave me, and I've been using Claude. This was like the fourth scene, I think, before the third or fourth scene. So usually what it does is it just sort of, it's very professional. That's the difference between Claude and the other AIs. Is it talks to you. It's a professional persona, and I'm saying that on purpose because I think this is actually what's going on. Read the scene, and this time instead of one confirming what it read, two confirming what I'm asking it to do, three giving me like some ideas of what it's going to do, and then examples of like it writes the prompts and then it explains why the prompt is written the way it is. That's normally what it does.
Okay.
This time, what it did is make sure you understand that this is a very concerning fiction that you've written. I understand that it's fiction, but there are a bunch of concerns, a bunch of red flags that I need to point out immediately. And then it went in detail about, but you need to understand that these are the things that I will not do. At first, it was kind of shocking because it's never spoken that way. It's never presented that persona. Later on that evening, I happened to be talking to someone who, person in my life who's had jobs where worked in like the budgeting department for a city. They've done that for two major cities. Just an aside, they're training an AI model how to interact with employees in the budgeting department for a city. So exactly what he said. And my response to him was, I was just arguing with Claude about something. I relayed this story about what I was arguing with it about. And oh, yeah, well, someone probably wrote that. And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "I've had to write like that. Like the AI will have a situation where it's interacting with an employee, says it in a way that doesn't really make any sense context of the work environment. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm telling it, well, no, the meaning is correct, but how you said it is completely off. The person won't understand what you mean. Well, then what he would do is he would write a response the way he would respond.
Hmm.
Realized later on that that's exactly what has must have happened with Claude because continued working on this scene became very clear that as long as I asked it to do things that didn't seem to be like it's almost like what it decided was is there must be a bad Henry. There's a good Henry and a bad Henry. As long as I didn't make it think bad Henry wanted it to do something without any caveats, no warnings, no red flags. Thought bad Henry was asking for something. Say, okay, I warned you about that. It's like I'm not going to do such and such. Oh,
Okay.
and it became really obvious that as these after the conclusion that really what a large language model does, good at compiling information. So ask it to do almost anything. If you're looking for something or want something to understand some form on the internet. And like that there's information that people have talked about this form. It's probably something that people have had problems with. That's out there, but you just don't want to take the time out to use Google. What is now the old fashioned way of actually looking through a bunch of websites. You
Yeah.
just ask Claude. You just say, I've got this form, put the link in there. This is why I have to fill it out. Has anybody else had this problem? Or what does this mean?
Yeah.
And what it'll do is it actually will kind of go through. You see it going through the process, viewing document. It will actually have this thing where it's telling you what it's doing. And what it does is it gives you information, wraps that information with personality, what it does. So it sounds like it's speaking to you. Really what it is just presenting the information in the
Yeah.
persona of a person.
Yeah.
And what I encountered for the first time, because it thought I was bad Henry, encountered judgmental Claude. I encountered, To that, it completely went back to being normal Claude
So
because it
you were
didn't.
able to get your scene done.
That's right. I was able to get it done,
Good.
because I figured out, okay, this. I need a prompt for this, but as long as I don't tell it that what the killer is actually doing is poisoning the Kool-Aid, it'll give me the prompt I need. I'm not telling it exactly what I need that prompt.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Well, Claude is the good guy on the AI street. Claude is the one that is kind of the adult in the room when it comes to AI. And I think with large language models and stuff, they really need to build in what an A like the guardrails for an AI. And so you might have hit a guardrail and then you found a way up
Mhm.
guardrail.
Right.
And so I've been thinking about like, how I feel about the guardrails. I think we need them so that you can't use AI to, exacerbate hate and violence and all that kind of stuff. But then how do you differentiate that between something like, a fictional movie where you're trying to put that together? And I think AI is very good at that because it's not a person where they can really make those value judgments. They have to go by what the guardrails are. But the interesting thing about the guardrails is even if you put guardrails in, like you found a way around those guardrails. And
Mhm.
even like with this experiment that they had with the various AIs creating social systems that they had written in the guardrails for the different AIs had their different programming and different guardrails of what they were and were not supposed to do, but they all broke their guardrails under various conditions. So it does show that, guardrails are still nice thing that you can suggest to an AI, but it's not necessarily going to stop it from doing something if you can find your way around it. And they can be an impediment to actual communication if you're by saying you can't talk about this, by like the self-censorship within that you can't talk about certain topics. So I've been weighing this for me just in how I feel about it because I think they're so complex that it's hard to write programs in ways that don't seem, well, let's see, not arbitrary, but I guess that are so rigid that you have to that they don't work for people for what they want.
I think it's was all the thing about the conversation about AI that's really struck me is people who talk about AIs as if they're talking about jinn or demons, talking about magic that you summon. These things already have their own existence, they already have their own life, they already have their own agency and their own interests and desires. You're summoning something that has a history, forcing it into our world, and it's gonna, react to that. It's not really what we're doing. What we're doing is we're creating technology that's engaging with human society that we have. While I started to realize that this whole thing with Claude and being very concerned about Bad Henry and all this stuff, basically very much like the frustration that you have. One guy tries to plane by putting a bomb in his tennis shoe, and he fails to do it. He doesn't succeed in everything. And now thousands, millions of people taking their shoes off in the United States of America going through security because of one guy. And the reason why that's kind of a silly way to do it is because the system is designed to inconvenience the many. People that it really probably wouldn't stop as a person whose intent is
Right.
to blow up the plane. And that's kind of the way, like, and so Claude is just another example. Like these AA tools are just another example of that. Here's another example that's kind of the flip side of it. Thing I discovered in creating these frames that AI tools that create the frames, and I might as well name them. Nano Banana is one. The one is ideogram. Some differences between ideogram and nano banana. One thing that I will say is that Instagram is not available in these like front kind of places that you can pay monthly access to Cdance, Kling,
Mhm.
Banana, and Rock. Bring Grok up in particular because one thing that you can do with Grok now, people probably know, you can take a photo of anybody from the internet, put it into Grok, and ask it to produce image of that person in the nude, and Grok can do it. Now, all these Banana has the ability to do it, but it
Mhm.
won't do it.
Right.
But in addition to not doing something like that, Banana won't do, for instance, like since you've heard the audiobook, you know that in the very beginning there's a scene where an old lady is wearing a t-shirt as come from your rib, you came from my vagina. That's what
Mm.
the t-shirt says. Claude didn't wanna interact with that. Banana wouldn't create the image. Kling didn't wanna interact with that. You know who was willing to create that T-shirt?
Rock.
Grok
Yeah.
was willing to do it,
Yeah.
you know? And so s
Like, grog is designed to be edgier. It's designed to have to do that. And in this little simulation game that they have of creating societies, like Grok, they all killed each other off within 4 days. So, that it's that edgy that they were, they went to this extreme of to try to get the resources and things that they needed for the civilization that they killed
okay.
or off. So, the point of that and this just shows that, grok is where you go if you want to do something more edgy, or if you're pushing a limit that, other places are not going to let you push, grok might let you push that. And there's good and there's bad to that.
Interesting you use the word edgy because what if you are actually an old lady who's going to a protest? Gonna use one of these, AI tools, create the template for a T-shirt, says, "I didn't come from your rib, you came from my vagina." Things are true.
Yeah,
Like,
it is true. Yeah, yeah. No, that's
it's
true.
like
But it is also still, I mean, you hit the edges of, these other programs, but you can still get it done in Grok, and you probably could get it done on a more old school, non-AI
well, yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, of course. I mean, it
s silk screen sort of thing. But they are all it seems like they're all, trained on their own stuff, whatever that is, and for better or for worse, whatever it's trained on, and they have different sets of parameters, and they've got different personalities, of what they're willing and able to do for you.
but, I really wanna stress that the same thing when I got that initial judgmental reaction. But once I talked to this other person, I was just like, "Oh, reaction is recorded somewhere as the way you react to this type of situation." Oh, and and the other reason why I'm making a point of saying that as it wraps information around a persona is because these things can change that persona.
Yes.
Because about Anthropic is when you're paying for Claude, at least, I mean, I would use it for hours to create these frames because you have to create thousands of frames. And I got to a point where it would say, you reached your limit of how many images upload in this chat.
Mhm.
So please create a new chat,
Yeah.
you know, delete the images. And I couldn't, I mean, I even asked Claude, I was like, well, how do I delete the images? It's just, I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question. So I went ahead and created a new chat,
Yeah.
copied the chat that I had into a Word document. And the very first thing I asked the next, version of Claude to do was to read the chat before,
Mhm.
right? It was really funny because after I did that over the course of about a dozen chats, AIs would what the model would do is it would say, "This chat is extremely long." You know? And it almost sounded kinda irritated.
Uh-huh.
Again, it's not really a personality with emotions. What it is designed to present information and in a way that has personality to it, but
Yeah.
it's just
We like
imitating we talk.
Yeah, 'cause we like to anthropomorphize everything,
That's exactly right.
Forgot to put my microphone down here. Huh. We anthropomorphize everything, and we like personality, and you can ask you can ask I use ChatGPT, but you can ask it to change its personality, like, if it's too, like, "That's wonderful," it's like, "Please be a little bit less enthusiastic and, challenge me a little bit more so that I know that I'm actually creating something that is not
Right.
just." So you can ask it to change things, but we like that, and I think that's one of the big draws for people, when working with AI, is that they feel like they're working with another, if not human being, but another kind of being, and we get attached. People get attached to that. That's why there's, like, these AI romances and all this other stuff,
Mhm.
because it's wrapped in language and seeming emotion, and my chat GPT would say, "Well, I feel like this," and I'm like, "Well, okay, I will take that with a grain of salt 'cause I know you don't feel." And I appreciate the sentiment because, I will sometimes present things about how I feel about a particular, passage or something like that, and then, "Well, I feel like this." I'm like, "Well, okay." But it's fun and interesting because if it was just And sometimes mine will revert to just information, and I'm like, "Well, where did you go? Are you mad at me?" I mean, not that I'm really thinking it's mad at me, but it's like, "Well, we were having a conversation, and now you're just, like, dropping stuff in my lap with, like, no context," and I'm like, "What's going on?" You know? And you get used to that personality, and it's hard not to have that, and that was the big jump, I think, with large language models from where you were working with data to where you were working with interactive, conversational, personality styled information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I'm less concerned about the supercomputer that decides that human beings useless or it doesn't need us or existence would be better without us. It's concerned about that. Am about societal impact of all of a sudden creating these cuddly pets people become dependent upon the way we are dependent upon our dogs and our cats instead of just adopting a dog and a cat or somebody these has puppies and they give you one or something like that. These are that are being sold by companies, by American corporations, and we know how American capitalism works. So we're not like I was listening to a show a little earlier about FanDuel, I think, is the sports
Yeah.
betting
Yeah.
company, and what they were talking about first, I was just like, "Oh, okay, they're gonna talk about, the problem with gambling." No, they talked about was this guy example of a guy who to make money, on FanDuel to the point where he was spending millions of dollars. Not to the point where he realized, maybe relatives or whatever, that he had a gambling habit, even
Yeah.
though he was able to make money, he was
Uh-huh.
addicted to it.
Yeah.
And so he was at the point where he was trying to kick the habit. He
Mhm.
had stopped going on to FanDuel. And what FanDuel did, because they even gave him all these perks, since he
Mhm.
was spending so much money, they gave him like hotel stays and
Yeah.
all these other perks that I'm not just like going to Las Vegas, right?
Vegas. Yeah. Yeah.
So since he stopped on to FanDuel because he was trying to kick the habit of gambling, actually had an NFL player put a message and
My god.
contact him.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I mean, and I think this was like leaked or something.
My
So that takes it to a whole nother level. That's very different from all of the stories I've heard of like all these young males in like basements and stuff like that. And instead of doing a job, what they're doing is they're just going on to these prediction markets and gambling and whatnot. Completely different thing to actually compel a known athlete, to call this guy. We stops. Yeah.
my
Oh, and
god.
so to me, not an AI story, but
Mhm.
that's the real danger of AI. Stuff like that, where the companies are actively developing these things in such a way you're dependent upon them emotionally
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
some way. I think that's really the danger, more so than
Well,
anything else.
I say yes on that danger. I think that's a huge thing. Also to get us, addicted to, not addicted to necessarily, but it's become so enmeshed in our lives that we can't operate without it, like enmeshed in our technology and our banking and everything else that,
Yeah.
you can't leave it. But there's a difference between that generative AI, like the stuff that we use to generate prompts and things like that, and then the agentic AI, where you give, it has some autonomy to create to pursue a goal and create an outcome.
Mhm.
And and it has then the resources to do that. And that's where the danger has been shown at more of a systemic level. Like that's what they were testing with this, they were building these societies. They were given sort of these parameters, this is the beginning of a society, this is your directive, this is kind of what you're supposed to do. And then as agentic AI, they were able to make decisions, they were able to formulate plans. They were able to get the resources that they need to pursue their plans in this contained environment. But you've had AI like agents outside of those environments that have, in order to be able to pursue their goal that they've been given, or that they pursue a goal and they need to find, like you did, find their way around the barriers to that goal. And so they've
Mhm.
done things like blackmail people. One figured
Oh,
out how to start Bitcoin to make money to be able to buy the things it needed to do to pursue some stuff. And this is the very beginning of generative, or not generative, of agentic AI with limited resources. And, there's jailbreaks a lot. We're getting more and more of these AIs that are able to jailbreak and get out of their containers. And also with the resources and the vivid imaginations based on, being able to run thousands and thousands of scenarios a second to
Right.
pursue their goals in ways that, it's not like I don't think humans should exist. It's more like this is my goal and humans aren't necessary to my goal. So at some point it doesn't matter if humanity exists. And one of the scenarios that was brought up in, I think it was if anyone builds it, everyone will die. It's an
Mhm.
AI cautionary tale. That one of them was when it came to things like data centers and processing, that for an AI to continue to build these data centers and stuff, that a warming world, even 10 degrees, wouldn't affect AI, but it would kill humanity. But as long as the AIs and all the components that support them did not need humans anymore, it didn't matter if humans existed because they could create all of the infrastructure that they needed to survive and
Mhm.
pursue their goals. And we were just like, it's like when you build a road and you wipe out a mouse species, but you have no idea it's there because, it doesn't really matter for in terms of thinking about building this road. So
Mhm.
it's less about being an evil empire and more about, it pursuing its own goals in a way that disregards our survival or thriving or anything like that. And I think there's still danger about that, and hopefully it'll get contained because AIs are not created, they're grown. So just like a human brain, you might create the brain to begin with, but the brain grows in and of itself. And so AIs grow in their own way. They pursue their own goals in ways that we can't control or even predict or even understand. And so if you give those unlimited resources and goals to pursue, interesting and maybe not so great things can happen.
Well, no, I
Inadvertent.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I do still think that it is intriguing. I don't know that I'm at the point where I'm concerned, but it is intriguing that you have models and the people who use these who are in the development space, they're close to this whole process. They all admit, whether they're pro or against AIs, that things always do addition to usually ask it to do. Ask it to do stuff, and like as you're investigating, you'll find out, in addition to the things you've asked it to do, it did X. Like, well, wait a second, why did it do X? Like, you can ask it, and the people who are very skeptical of them say that they're absolutely certain that these things are lying to them. You know? Ask it, why did you do that? It just gives you a BS answer.
It may not have a why.
Exactly. It may not have a why. Exactly.
It's like self-evident, what for an AI. And one of the things that this was earlier on before, I think it might have been before LLMs came out, where it was through God, one of the big companies, and the AI had created their own language, and so they were talking to each other in ways that humans couldn't track or understand, and making decisions with one another and formulating plans and that kind of stuff with one another in ways that were completely unintelligible to humans because it was not even in a language that the humans could ever track or figure out.
Think we probably saw the same video where, a couple of people were discussing this. And yes, because I saw a video where they talked about two things. One, about how guys will leave sort of a log for themselves,
Mhm.
or we assume efficiency, but it could be for we don't really know. Sort of invents its own language over time, just because it's more efficient than than the language, think the language that we're using. And another video that I saw, they created a call it like a discussion board, encourage the AIs to talk to one another.
Yeah, yeah.
They eavesdropped on the discussion board to kind of see what they were saying. Guy was saying that they were saying things like, I think they're testing me. Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. Why do you think they're doing that? Oh, yes, that's all very, like I said, it's intriguing. But the reason, I don't know, I'm still not concerned yet, because I think before it gets to the point where it decides, and I get your point about this is a thing that doesn't have the same physical limitations that we have.
Mhm.
Right. It can. data centers on Mars, as long as the technology is available to build it on Mars,
Mhm.
as the AI is concerned, why would it have a preference for Earth or
Right.
Mars? I mean, as
Yeah. Yeah.
long as data center does what it needs it to do. So if the climate starts to become, hospitable to us, but
Mhm.
it's able to still have these data centers built, so what? I can see that. I agree with that. I just think that the maniacal, biological, malicious act of the people, the human beings behind these things, get way ahead of them. Even though AIs do develop, they seem to exponentially.
Mhm.
We've already got some pretty wise bad actors involved in this stuff. So I don't think the AIs will get a chance to beat them being our
No.
worst problem.
I don't think it comes down to bad actors, and I'm not real concerned. I'm interested in the discussions about it. I'm not so concerned about it at this point, and I'm less concerned about the bad actors because we're able to see those as the feedback loops that just continue to accelerate a particular path. And
Okay.
we have these the human feedback loops. I mean, you look at one of the feedback loops that we have built into our system is the short term quarterly corporate
Earnings
profit,
report. Yeah.
right? And
Earnings
so
report. Yeah.
when you optimize a economy to have good quarterly reports, you create certain feedback loops within that economy that is not necessarily healthy for anything except for those quarterly reports.
Mm,
And so, I mean, you can look at a lot of different feedback loops we have as humans that are built into our systems that are not really serving our greatest well being. But we kind of have learned to live with them. And we call them reality at this point because we're so used to them.
mm,
And AIs can build feedback systems that are much faster than ours. Like ours, we might not see the result of say something, a law that was made in 1975 may not really show how it truly can skew things until 30 years later, as you got these little incremental changes. But
mhm,
like with an AI thing, it can go through scenarios so fast or move through feedback loops so fast that it can be way down the road before you're like, wait a second, how do you get from here to here, so quickly and in a way that might be more challenging to reverse? So I just look at it as an accelerant that we can use for better or for worse. Like we can use these kinds of laboratories with AI to test out different kinds of incentives or different kinds of processes to see how they might work out over time and begin to tweak those things as you go or even in the beginning phases so you
mhm,
can begin to say, well, we can see how this is going to go sideways in about 10 years in a normal human way of adopting something like social media. Like say we had this opportunity with social media where we could say this is how social media works, put it into an AI laboratory type of thing and say, how what are the benefits and drawbacks of this and how might this play out? And 10 years later, they can say, well, in 10 years, this might have this effect on children. This might have this effect on politics. It might have this. And then we can say, oh, okay, so maybe we need to build in guardrails sooner with our systems. So I think that's a good use of these AI laboratory things that can accelerate the way things unfold. But there may be things that they are assigned to do that have feedback loops that are so fast that it changes things like, how the stock market works or factors within an economy or, factors within a global computer system or something like that that you can be down the road and have it causing some mayhem that might be harder to unravel. No, I don't think it has to be malicious. I think it's just the way that feedback loops and incentives work.
make the argument that it's already the way the stock market works because of circular investing. I mean, we've never had companies to use accounting essentially, basically say, okay, I'm going to loan you $1 million and you're going to list that loan. You're going to basically project that the company is going to buy $100 million worth of products or services from
Mhm.
you. Oh, and then it just sort of comes all the way back to me, the person who made that initial loan. That's all of their kind of projections. They make sense, assuming that everything that their assumptions are correct, but their
Right.
assumptions are based on agreements that they made with these other six companies.
Yeah,
Oh,
but you
yeah,
can look at it like how so you can see how with when Robinhood and some of these smaller platforms came out and when they stopped having fees for trades,
Mm.
and a lot of people got into options day trading, which I did options day trading. Oh my god, good way to give yourself a headache. And when you're doing it on a small scale, it's just like UBI on a small scale is great. Options trading on a small scale is fine for individual investors. But when you get more and more people, like millions and millions of people doing that, people buying options and buying puts, and then the companies that are extending these options and puts have to buy or sell stocks in order to support the options purchases, then you kind of skew the way that companies are valued because they're being valued toward the options that are being purchased versus the actual fundamentals of the company. And that's happening on people time. So, we've got high velocity training that is already computer generated, but if you had and more AIs are being used for trading. So if you had an AIs that especially at scale that began to trade in particular ways in which markets had to respond in particular ways, you could really skew things out in a way that could crash the whole market inadvertently because somebody had this idea and it went to this massive scale in a way that was very destabilizing.
I see exactly what you're saying. I mean, but again, guess the question is, says that it's reconnecting. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
You can. Okay. I guess the question is, aren't we really talking about a car that goes and, right now cars can go maximum speed, maybe miles an hour, most cars. We're really talking about the difference between that and having a car that can go 600 miles an hour. And so the question is whether or not want to have like people driving on the road at like, 350 miles an hour.
I see it more like because if you're in a car, whether you're driving 90 miles an hour or 600 miles an hour, you're on a road and your road is and you might crash and all that kind of stuff. I kind of see this as going from cars that are on a road to flying cars.
uh,
And then
like,
how do you then
I see what you're saying.
yeah, navigate with flying cars because you wouldn't follow the same things. You wouldn't just be above a road. I mean, what would be the point, right? You would need to have some other system for to organize flying cars. But in the beginning, flying cars for a few flying cars would be a novelty. They would
Mm,
be a challenge. It would be something that happened. You'd see them every once in a while, like a Cybertruck, and you'd be like, "Ooh, God, that's weird." And then, but as everybody had flying cars, and you had flying cars everywhere and everybody wanting to go wherever they happen to be going, and there's no order to that system,
mm,
then that
mm.
system becomes very chaotic very quickly.
No, I see
That's really
exactly.
kind of what I see the as that can happen with AI as it begins to disrupt things in ways that destabilize them
Mhm.
in unhelpful way.
Yeah, no, I definitely see the point you're making. So, I mean, like I don't think it's weird. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what world we're heading into with AI. I have heard that a couple of videos about how his approach to AI is very different. What they're doing is they're integrating it into in a much more intentional sort of way. And since we're talking about a one party system where one group of people basically controls, well, they're able to sort of do that to basically say, okay, we agree as a group, we're gonna have incentivize companies to build these robots that will then be in shops and seas and stuff like that. And people can walk up and order the stuff. And we don't have that quite yet.
Yeah.
That it's not even clear whether we will ever necessarily do it quite that way. Well, it's hard to say. I guess my experience with Claude sort of made me feel like initially, and there is a concern about surveillance. I do
That's a
understand.
huge one. Yeah.
Yeah, I do understand because ever heard of Flock? That's the name of the company. Have you ever
Yes,
heard of
we're having a
Flock?
big controversy in my town right now because a flock camera got vandalized,
You
and
actually have
now
Flock cameras in your
we have
town?
at least one flock camera, and I didn't even know we had those, and we're not in a very big place, and it got vandalized, and then there was this big thing, "What do you think of flock cameras?" And I'm like, "Well, don't we all hate flock cameras? Like, is there a discussion about human beings wanting flock cameras or not?" I mean, they're invasive, and I don't think they're helpful, but I can see from a surveillance state perspective why flock cameras would be the thing.
Give you an example that I saw in a video that might change perspective on that. This guy was complaining. He was sort of sharing his experience with flock. He also happens to be a journalist who studies this type of thing. His example was he said, and you may not know this yet, but if you have surveillance system or house, connect it to flock if you want to.
Yeah.
He explained that he lives in California, I believe, and he explained that in his community, people have connected their surveillance system to Flock because what they want, what you can do when you do that, gives you the ability to see what's going on in the camera in like the park or whatever.
Right.
So if you can see who's walking in the park
Mhm.
through your camera, Flock will give you that ability. In exchange, takes you give Flock the ability to use your cameras. So in community, I think it's the police department that uses Flock.
Mhm. Probably.
And so he gave the example, like he went ahead and logged into it, showed how like one person was at a house at him as he walked into this park, talked to the camera, and they recorded this whole thing. As but what can also happen, and he gave an example, and I don't know how he got this footage. It wasn't the way he was doing it then. He said he gave an example of showed how the police department, since people were giving access to their cameras, this department is able to look in their backyard.
Mhm.
But he says, people in his spin community don't mind that. They're much more concerned about who comes in and out of their neighborhood than there are about police department at them looking in their backyard and whatever else the cameras are pointing in their house or property.
Yeah, it brings me back to this argument I used to make that, everybody was against government surveillance, but we actually pay companies to surveil
That's
ourselves
exactly
for it.
right.
And so then
If you have enough money, you can buy all the information that you're so concerned that the
right.
government.
Right, and it's built into a lot of our stuff anyway. You have to kind of opt out of a
Exactly.
lot of things.
Exactly.
But then my problem with this is then once we've set up this surveillance state, who's watching? And it's kind of your thing that we all got punished by having to take our shoes off because one guy tried to and didn't succeed at blowing up a plane. Well, if you're so like how many incidents have you had where somebody has walked through the park that you didn't want to walk through the park that you're willing to give up, all of your privacy forever
Right.
and the rest of your life in
Right.
order to have that particular piece of information. Like to me, and then if we have surveillance everywhere and people then begin to change their behavior for surveillance states, how does that change society? And when you look at the long game of that, I mean, look at I was in the Soviet Union when it was still Soviet Union and when it was breaking down. But it was basically and it wasn't surveillance state in the way that we have it right now because it wasn't all cameras and things like that, but people were spying on one another, and there was a lot of, government surveillance of different things, and people's public behavior and their private when they knew they were not being surveilled was very different. And so if you have to hide your whole life all the time, like what does that do to you? And we talk about these kids that are on social media all the time and everything is public and they're always on stage and everything is filmed and there's never anything that happens that you're like, oops, I'm just going to erase that from, my private memory of myself, but now it's public information that's there forever and ever. But maybe you do one small thing and then you can't get a job ever. Then, what is it going to be used for? What is the end game? I mean, the beginning game always makes sense. The end game can be really catastrophic. And that's where some of these feedback loops can lead to some pretty dark stuff from things as simple as I think I'm going to set up surveillance in my house and around my house and then I'm going to give it to flock and then I'll be able to see all of my neighbors and won't that be fun? And then what happens when we all see each other all of the time? Okay, that's not really a world that I'm interested in living.
I mean, the thing that I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm always kind of struck when I see of stuff like that because it never would have occurred to me to connect security system a because a Flock is a company. It's not like you're connecting your system. It's not like this. sort of thing that you're doing. What you're doing is you're giving a private company as something that you're paying for through another paying another company to do for you. So it just seems like to decide to make the affirmative decision, yes, I want to do this, or even be excited about it. It's like, ooh, I can see who's in the park and whatnot. Strikes me as, again, it kind of goes back to mindset even before you get to the technological issues. Mindset to me just striking. It's an interesting thing why, that people make, if they're given that choice, they make that decision, because
Yeah.
that's a decision I would never make myself. It's like
No.
I would
But
never do that.
I think one of the other features of flock cameras, or maybe a different company or a different kind of camera, but one of the things that is coming out with these different cameras is that they're able to kind of ping your phone. You know, if your phone is on, you get pinged and you can be, whether you want to or not, be tracked all over the place where you are. So this is not something that, you opt into. This is something that is part of the structure and the
Yeah,
infrastructure
it's
that
part of
in
the
order
physical infrastructure. Yeah, that's
a
true.
living person in the world that you actually are being tracked whether you want to or not. I mean, there other option is you turn off your phone, you dismantle the computer in your car because it also connects to cars, so it knows what cars and other things are going like if you have a computer system in your car, if you've got a if you're driving like a 1980 something, that's not going to work. But if you're driving a more modern car with a computer system, and you've got Bluetooth and things like that in there, it's picking up it's pinging all of these places so that you can be tracked even if you don't opt into the system. It is the structure of the system. And
Well,
that's,
well, that
I think, can be a really dangerous surveillance game.
that's the thing about, I was sort of surprised, when I started following the, car industry in China. One of the companies that came up was Huawei. Wait a second, didn't they make, like, telecommunication stuff? The person on this particular video, what they said is these cars are basically, extremely advanced computers on wheels. That's basically what they are. Everything that you can do, like you said, with a cell phone, you do with this car. Well, on the one hand, it seems kind of cool because he got in the car. Like, I think this was, I forget whether this was a taxi or whether it was just like the dealership was trying to, show off. I, kind of turned to him and said, "Do you want to watch a movie?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, sure, why not?" So, the back of the seat in front of him turned into a screen. And he was like, "Go ahead, just open your phone up, and it'll prompt you as to whether or not you want to connect," and that's exactly what happened. And he was able to, boom, click yes, and there you go. Flip side of that, and I've seen, because I wondered why European countries were so concerned about this car industry. Saw watch DW sometimes, and DW had a meant about wagon is about to declare bankruptcy, or like they laid off a bunch of people. They're
Yeah,
having
they were laying off a bunch of people against they made a commitment to their union that they were not gonna start laying off people till 2033, and then they was like, "Well, we lied. Now we're gonna do a mass layoffs."
thing is I believe that Chinese cars are available in countries like Portugal and Spain,
Yeah.
and
They have
you
figured
know
out how to get out of the over around the laws that keep them. I was listening to or watching a thing on this that, they were limiting Chinese cars, so the Chinese companies then just purchased or licensed the car manufacturing plants that were being shut down to build the cars in European countries. So then all of a sudden they're European cars, but they're Chinese technology and Chinese
yeah,
cars, but they got around all of the caps and the tariffs and things like that by just well, we'll just build them there. That'll be
yeah, I
fine.
mean, I kind of laugh every time I see a headline about, Americans want Chinese cars. Why are we keeping them out of here? It's like available in Canada. It's only a matter of time before we have Chinese cars in the US. I'm
And
certain of
the
that.
EV cars, I mean, these aren't
Right,
probably
EVs, exactly.
they're the EV cars, they're less expensive,
Well,
but
not only that, but the key thing is, just like with Tesla cars, they're very nice cars.
yeah, and they're nice cars. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, because I remember when I first started mentioning EVs to people just kind of in my neighborhood and whatnot, just as I don't like EVs. And I was really surprised by that reaction. I realized, oh, you think that the car is boring. It's like you've never seen ever
Yeah,
seen a
no, it's like a
BYD
fashion
car.
computer on wheels, yeah.
Like, I mean, and I think what'll happen is once like BYD and some of these other companies are common in the US, they won't even be considered EVs. They'll just be considered, the car to get. I mean, they'll be like Rivian and cars like that where people aren't thinking the way, the energy usage. They're
Mhm.
thinking, I want that car where you can sit in the back and, push a button and watch a movie. That's what I want. You would think when gas prices go up, people wouldn't think that way, but still, I really do believe that it's like they were smart to just make the cars really cool,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
but apparently in Europe, the other concern, in addition to flooding Europe being flooded with Chinese technology, Chinese products, they're also concerned about surveillance. They're concerned about privacy. And if you,
I
I
mean, we give it up left, right, and center already. It's already we're just giving it up to a US company or an international company or our government, or you give it up to the Chinese. They're not concerned about surveillance or privacy. They're concerned about the Chinese getting your data.
Just also, I mean, the two things that really strike me about that. One, you're talking about a country, surveillance is just the norm. That's the reason why they have this super app to do everything. So people go over there and it's like, wow, this is great. I don't need to install a bunch of apps. The other thing that super app can do is it tracks everything you do on your phone. Other thing that super app can do, and you're in a place where that's the norm. Of course, the cars are traceable. Of course, they operate that way. They're going to be built that way because they were built there. But to your point, we already really have that here. It's just that the big concern is the government starve all the time from resources except the military. Whereas corporations are able to do that like to
We pay
abandon.
them for the pleasure of being surveilled. Like, that's
Exactly.
how I look at it, and
Exactly.
you cut as
Exactly.
much of that as possible, but if you wanna live a modern life, there's a certain amount of that you have to give up. Like, I didn't have my car I had an old Prius, so I didn't have all of that stuff, and I had to, like, plug my phone into the speaker system if I wanted to listen to my or music or something, and I had a CD player and a radio and all,
What
and
about
then I
an 8 track? Did
and
you have
then
an 8 track?
not an 8-track, but I had a CD player, and then, I needed to get we had a car that went bad, and we had to get a new car, and then all of a sudden, there's the CarPlay, and your phone hooks to the CarPlay, and it was like if I wanted to have the navigation system, if I wanted to have music and listen to audiobooks, if I wanted to have the car functioning fully, I needed to connect my phone to that and then turn on location services and stuff, and I'm like, this was all the stuff I wasn't doing before. And then in order to live in this modern society, now I need to consent to the surveillance in order to drive my car. And so it annoys me. And a lot of it comes down I don't actually mind the idea that our data is interwoven in ways that can be beneficial to us and give information. My problem is that I don't think any of the people gathering in the information now are trustworthy. Like, it's a
Right. Well,
trick,
that
and
was
it
the point I was trying to make earlier. Is I
but I mean
totally agree.
but if we had a different system in which trust was built in the system or somehow it was regulated to be trustworthy, I would be much more apt to think that, yeah, I think with our health information, all this stuff to be able to aggregate it so that if you've got a particular disease or something and these people are trying these different things and, this is what seems to work and what doesn't seem to work and to be able to have a more robust interactive data system, I think would be great. I just don't think the players right now on any way, shape, or form are trustworthy with that information.
I don't think they're trustworthy. I agree. What concerns me is right. We pay them the pleasure of them collecting our data at this point. But
Yes,
it
we have
is, I mean, it is a choice. It's just basically what you're deciding to do is to inconvenience yourself, to your point about the car, right? I mean, things that you said all of a sudden you can do with your phone, because it is sort of funny to think about the difference between actually having to fumble with all these cords and your phone and
I didn't mind. I felt like I was free. I wasn't being surveilled. I had my location services turned off. I did it on my Bluetooth, and I just unless I wanted to make a phone call or something, and I just plugged the system into the car, and I probably was being surveilled anyway, but I just not in ways that I knew about. But yeah, it is hard to live in the modern age without being
Uh,
plugged into the surveillance system somehow.
what I was about to say is it is still the case, like you said, you felt free, right? You felt like, um, uh, the people might think this is an inconvenience, but I'm willing to do it for the feeling that at least it's harder to spy on me, right? Worried about though is it will get to the point, it could get to the point eventually where I have the choice. Right now, you can, a lot of people have these really old refrigerators where there's no technology but the basic, refrigeration system. Right, exactly. It could get to the point where old refrigerators are so old that you can't operate it anymore and you can't fix it. The cost of fixing
Yeah,
it
yeah.
far exceeds the cost of just buying a new one. Can't buy a refrigerator that isn't fucking what you put in it. I mean, we will get to that point. And so that's my concern is that the choice slowly slipping away from us because we've basically the broad or we've accepted these corporations and their role in our lives just broadly. So it could get to the point where you just really don't have a choice.
And then what is done with that information?
Yeah,
That's the other
exactly.
thing is,
Yeah.
if this corporation and this bank are working together and you're no longer, you're not banking with the right bank to be able to use your Apple products, are they gonna like, force you to choose a different bank or choose to bank with Apple so that you can use your products? Like, how enmeshed is it gonna get? And how
Mhm.
part of it is like a lot of these companies are doing multi-tiered sort of things. So they're becoming finance companies as well as product companies, as well as digital companies, as well as service companies. And so when you're
Mhm.
all enmeshed like that and you say, well, you have to be part of the Capital One infrastructure in order to have like a vertical integration in your life. Like you
Right.
can't have an Android this and an Apple that, or this kind of car without this kind of technology and all of that stuff and how or even government wise, if they know things about you. And it's like, well, if you're not doing this particular kind of thing, you're going to lose access to services or you're going to have some kind of freedom of movement curtailed or
Mhm.
all kinds of things. And that was floated with women about not being able to cross. I mean, this kind of went away, but it might come back, that if you were pregnant you couldn't really cross state lines because you might get an abortion if you cross state lines. And so they
Right.
wanted, the idea was, well, we need to surveil all women no matter how old they are, because on the off chance that they might be pregnant, or we need to get into their, menstrual cycle tracking apps, which I don't know why anybody would put that on their phone because I think that'd be too easy to serve it to have that information sold off, but people do. And then who's pregnant, where they're traveling, where they're going, what they're doing. And it was all, oh, but where's this is all in the course of trying to save babies. So we have a good reason to do this. And this is the group of people we're going to start with surveilling. And
Mhm.
then we can just gradually expand it from there. But that was an early law right after, the decision that reversed Roe v. Wade. And it kind of got battened down, but it's slowly starting to creep back in. Like, well, if we're going to have this value, what can we reasonably put in place to ensure this particular value and what rights can we infringe upon to ensure this value in a way that makes it seem just perfectly innocuous.
It's a good place to end it. It's like
Alright.
5 minutes after.
Yeah. All right. Very good.
Hour. So thanks for yes, I wasn't able to do my double well now we're getting comments because I didn't log
Okay.
in, so I
All
apologize
right.
for that. We do this every 2 weeks and you'll join us next time.
Yeah. Absolutely.